Hi, everybody. How's it going? It's Coach Rod from Elite College Soccer Camps. I'm looking forward to doing our meeting today. I'm going to give everybody maybe another minute or so as I sort of let people into the room. And I look forward to starting. So let me share my screen very quickly, and then we will get started. So as kind of letting everybody in, let me get our slideshow here. Okay. All right. How's it going? I just want to remind everybody to be on mute as much as you can. Well, really for the whole time. If at the very end you wish to ask a question, you can, but otherwise, ask any questions you want in the chat and we'll just go from there. Okay. So, any question that you have at any point, just I'll address it in the chat box and I'll go through them as we progress and I'll make sure to get any questions that are in the chat. All right. So, a couple things just to kind of get an idea first of the landscape of the things that we're dealing with for the most part. So, any given year out of high school in the US, there's about 450,000 high school boys soccer players, I would say. Um, Maybe not necessarily all of them are aspiring to play in college, or certainly that's not the case, but certainly a lot are. But that means there's about, just to give you an idea with college programs, that means about 10% maybe are going to play college soccer out of that 450,000, more or less, just because there's about 1,200 soccer programs, more or less, in the country, 4-year schools and 2-year schools. And that just means, more or less, there's about 40,000 spots. So, the top 1 to 2% typically are playing of that are typically playing in Division One. The next sort of percentile, maybe, or the same percentile, are playing in Division Two, as well as then Division Three, and then NAIA, which we'll talk about and what that means, as well as junior college stuff. So, I think some things to keep in mind is that, you know what, if you play college soccer anywhere, that's quite an accomplishment. You are a rock star. It's not easy to play college soccer, and I think sometimes maybe just to be reminded that even Division Three, Division Two, NAIA, even some junior colleges, it's quite an honor to play there, and to not maybe dismiss some of those options and opportunities as well, instead of just maybe just thinking about only those top sort of schools that we've always heard of. So be grateful in that respect. But another piece of the puzzle that's important is, what's going to get you to stand, I guess, or be set apart, right? What's going to get you to be different than those other 400 and however many thousand kids that want to play? How do you become one of those 40,000 that get to play, right? At any given year, what's going to set you apart? So that's hopefully what we'll work towards today in the meeting. And then there's just new NCAA legislation, and I'm guessing some of you have heard, maybe, but the NCAA just granted another year of eligibility to a player in football. This is football. He played junior college, and then he sort of went to the NCAA and said that his junior college shouldn't count because it's not part of the NCAA, and he wasn't allowed to get NIL money and things like that. So the NCAA actually granted him an extra year, not counting one of his years of junior college. And typically, the way that the NCAA works, if they do something for one sport or one gender, they typically need to do that for others. So I wouldn't be surprised if that comes down the pipeline in the coming years, where if you played junior college, that doesn't count, and you would still have 4 years of eligibility. If that does happen, obviously that would change the landscape tremendously, right? As well. It's not the case right now. That certainly doesn't seem like it's on the horizon this fall. But if it already happened once in football this year, you can imagine a world in which playing junior college for 2 years as basically post grad, I guess, not using any eligibility could be an option. It could mean that college coaches are looking almost primarily at those junior college kids. And I think it would kind of flip things on its head a little bit if that came into soccer. But again, that's not happening right now. So hopefully, it's not something necessarily that everybody has to worry about, but it is something just to be aware of and could change the landscape. So before we get going, I want to talk a little bit about just what is Division One, Division Two, and Division Three. I think it's really important that as we go through the process, you guys just have a better understanding of what is what, essentially. So in Division One, you have about 205 men's programs. We have out of our 22 schools represented and our 25 coaches. We have eight Division One programs, and here at the camp this weekend. And I think it's important that, we understand what does each division sort of mean in general, and then that'll kind of help you hone in on what it really means for you, right? So, of I guess I would say of all the divisions, that for the most part, I mean, certainly Division One is of the highest level generally, without a doubt. Generally has the most athletic scholarship money to give and offer, and generally is the most competitive level. Is that definitely the case in all cases? It's not. There are definitely Division Two and Division Three programs that can beat Division One programs on any given day. There's definitely some Division Two programs that have more athletic scholarship money than some Division One programs, believe it or not. Um, there's always opportunities at other divisions as well to do other things and get to the next level also. So it's not just that, but I think typically if you're going to a Division One institution, for the most part, the soccer is going to be the first priority. I was a Division One athlete. My wife was a Division One athlete. So we understand that, as Division One athletes, you're expected to put the sport first in almost all aspects. And it's not to say we weren't expected to do our schoolwork, because we were, but we were expected to do it at a level that would still allow us to compete on the athletic side. And that's a little bit different. And I'll talk about Division Three versus Division Two. But if you want to go to a world where, for the most part, the soccer, in this case, the sport, is going to be your main priority, and you still have to do school because every institution still has to have their players graduate. Some institutions really want their players to do really well in the classroom, and that's institution to institution. But for the most part, that school is going to help you, and that program is going to help you be successful on the soccer field. And that's really the main focus of, in this case, Division One soccer. Now, there's a few legislations that are changing. I know some of you guys have heard of the 28 roster cap and the unlimited scholarships and things like that, and, and NIL. I'm not I'm not sure yet how much NIL is going to change necessarily in soccer. It's not necessarily a high revenue sport, but we'll see. But what would change the equation is unlimited scholarships and or potentially the roster cap of 28. So if you are not that familiar, or even if you kind of are, firstly, nothing is firmly set yet. So we don't know yet if that is going to happen actually this fall in 2025. Coaches are sort of operating, and schools and institutions are sort of operating as is, if it's likely to happen, where the roster cap on any Division One men's soccer program and women's soccer program for that matter, but we'll keep it to men, would have to be 28. So some schools are starting to operate that way already. So that means some Division One programs are cutting players, are literally telling players, or did after this last semester, that, hey, sorry, thanks for being on the team, but we no longer have a place for you. There's some institutions that are just recruiting less numbers just in case that does happen, knowing that if it turns out that they're not going to do it, they can bring in players from junior college or transfers from other four-year schools later as well, or internationals. So there's a scenario in which a lot of Division One institutions are sort of waiting to kind of find out what their rosters are going to look like based on who was drafted, based on who might be transferring, based on if they have to have 28 or not. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind, especially if you're hoping for Division One. There are some schools that are definitely not full yet. They're just waiting to see if they have enough room. Now, with the unlimited scholarships, what that means is if a school opts in to this 28 roster cap, they could be granted and allowed to have up to 28 scholarships and scholarship each of their roster cap members. Now, does that mean most Division Ones are going to do that? For sure not, right? So just because a school could have 28 scholarships doesn't mean for men's soccer, right? Because if they do that for men's soccer, they have to do that for women's soccer and basketball and football and all the other sports that they have. So that'll cost a school a lot of money. So it's unlikely that every Division One school, or many actually, would really do a lot of unlimited scholarships, or at least in terms of scholarships up to 28. But they might have more scholarships. That's possible. But it also depends on if they opt in or not. So some schools have the ability to opt into that as well. So that means there might be a school that says, yeah, we want to opt into this 28 thing and 28 roster cap and unlimited scholarships. And then they live in that world. And then there might be some schools that literally just opt out and say, we're not part of that. We're going to keep it the way it is, 9.9 scholarships and unlimited roster cap. So, anyway, it's a long way to say that there's a lot of moving parts in Division One and Division Two soccer right now. And If you're 2025 or 2026 and you feel like it's been moving pretty slowly for you, a large reason for that is because coaches aren't exactly sure yet what that roster will be in the fall. Um, to talk about Division Two, same amount of numbers of teams for the most part. I think one of the biggest differences in Division One versus Division Two, because they both have internationals, they both a lot of internationals, they both have a high level of play. I think one of the biggest differences in Division One, Division Two, though, is the travel. Division One, I mean, Cal Berkeley and University of North Carolina, they're in the same conference in the ACC, right? Whereas in Division Two, you don't travel at all during the year outside of your region. So everybody in the West region, everybody in the Southeast region, in the Northeast region of Division Two and sort of that central area, they stay in their areas to play, right? So if you're a West Coast Division Two school, you're not going to leave the West Coast except for the Final Four. You might go to Colorado. Colorado schools are in the region. Texas schools are in the region. So I guess that would count as somewhat traveling on the West Coast if you want to look at it that way. But in the Southeast region, for example, I mean, there's schools in Florida and Alabama and Georgia, South Carolina, and they really just kind of travel within that. Whereas Division One, you're likely to go more coast to coast, or depends on your conference, play more games. So I think that's one of the biggest differences from Division One to Division Two. Slightly more balanced in Division Two, but in a lot of respects, Division Two is going to mirror Division One in terms of the expectations. It's going to be hard to have a full-time job or even a part-time job. It's going to be hard to, whether it's internships or just do other things outside of soccer in Division One or Division Two. And again, if your full goal is just to be a Division One or Division Two athlete and just make soccer your only thing, that's okay, right? And then these seem to be good places to fit you. But if you want to have a little bit more balance to do other things, that's where you'd probably explore Division Three or NAIA, which we'll talk about. But they're really, really competitive, both Division Ones and Division Twos. And it's really just a focus where most of the players that are going Division One, Division Two want to get to the next level of professional for the most part, professional soccer. Whereas in some cases, Division Three, as I talk about that, some of those players kind of understand that maybe this is going to be their last 4 years. So they want to make it a really good 4 years, but they also want to be set for what's life after soccer look like. And that's maybe when you kind of put all the divisions together in general, not always the case for sure. But generally speaking, when players are going into looking at Division threes, they're looking at places where they want to be able to know that they put the best foot forward in soccer, but also put their best foot forward in their business, in their life, in their career, so they're ready to go right as soon as graduation. Whereas typically a lot of Division One athletes are hoping, right, to be professional soccer players in this case, or again, professional in the world of professional sports of some sort of collegiate sports. Now, again, is that everybody? It's definitely not. But it's just something to keep in mind in general, the general mentalities of the schools and the institutions and the programs. In Division Three, again, you get that more well-balanced experience where academics takes the lead, but also it's on par with academics and athletics. So you're going to miss less class in Division Three, generally speaking. There's a few conferences that travel quite a bit, but for the most part, a lot of Division Three institutions aren't traveling tons, just a little bit. You have a slightly shorter spring season semester in Division Three, slightly, but not much. Um, and you'll start a little bit later in August so you'll start sort of middle of August as opposed to some of the Division Ones that start early August. The season is about a week longer or 2 weeks longer, depending on the back end in December in Division One, Division Two. But for the most part, there's a lot of similarities in that respect, besides the ones that we've spoken about already. Division three schools don't give athletic scholarships, but they do give, usually in most cases, a lot of merit aid and a lot of merit scholarship money potentially, or need-based aid. But that is an institution to institution thing. So it's not straight across the board. But I think one thing when considering Division three programs is to speak to the coach or speak to financial aid on campus and see how most families are affording those schools. Because I think you'd be surprised. I think sometimes there's just a thought that sort of smaller private schools are just really expensive, and in general, they are expensive. Of that, there's no doubt. But a lot of times, there's a lot of aid available at those institutions, and you just have to ask the questions of how it works at each individual school. Another program that, or another institution, well, an association of athletics that is available are called NAIA schools, so the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics. Those are four-year schools, and those four-year schools are really, really hidden gems sometimes. They have more scholarship money than Division One programs, and in addition to that, they're really competitive. Some of the top Division One programs in the country um, would compete with NAIA schools for sure, where like the NAIA school could be competitive with them. It's the top NAIA schools because they have scholarships, they have international kids, they have players that can really play at a high level. Some NAIA schools are not that competitive, comparatively speaking. So if you're looking at NAIA schools, they might be great places where you can get a lot of athletic money, some merit money. They might fit you as a personality wise, school wise. And I think just some people don't even look at NAIA schools. And so what I would do is just do a quick Google search, do men's soccer NAIA programs around me, wherever you live. And you'll probably see a list of some schools that you've never heard of, and then you'll see some schools that you certainly have heard of, right? And as you do a little bit more research, you might say, hey, maybe this is a place where I can play as well. But I think more families can explore this because I think playing at NAIA offers a valuable place to play college soccer, get an education. Maybe you get it paid for with scholarships, and you enjoy your time playing 4 more years of competitive soccer versus not. So keep that in mind as well as you're looking at your search. Some reminders from communication wise, because I think a lot of times there's sort of this general notion where if you're a sophomore or freshman, you shouldn't hear anything, and that's it. Coaches aren't going to talk to you. And that's not exactly true. So I do want to speak about that a little bit. So one, of course, there are no limitations if you're a junior or senior right now, a coach or above, or graduated already. A coach can speak to you as long as you're not on another college roster. There's no problem for a coach to speak to you. If you're sophomore, junior, sort of that timeline is in between your sophomore and junior year when you go on to, are able to be talked to or spoken to, right? So within that, just kind of understanding that even if you're a sophomore or even if you're a freshman, if you're, for example, if I'm a Division 3 head coach, which I am, I could actually speak to you. I don't have that restriction. That's just a Division 1, Division 2 restriction. So Division 3 coaches, for example, if you're in high school, can speak to players, right? So if you're a sophomore, doesn't mean that I can't call you back. I can, as a Division 3 head coach in my scenario. Whereas Division 1 or Division 2 coach could not. But the piece of the puzzle that's maybe different, especially this weekend, is that you can, at a camp, or if you're on campus, you can talk to a coach, right? So if a coach, for example, speaks to you this weekend, or if you want to, you can go up to, I'm talking to players, not parents. As a player, you can go up to any coach that we have, and I'm asking you to do that. Go up to any and every coach this weekend and talk to them. This is your opportunity. This is where that rule is not essentially in effect, right? So you're at a camp, you've enrolled in a camp, the coach is going to be there. You can speak to that coach freely. So this is an opportunity where even if you're a freshman or sophomore, you can speak to these coaches. If you're a junior or senior, of course, there's no restrictions anyway, but you should be speaking to these coaches as well. Another part is even though you're emailing these coaches, that's if you're a freshman or sophomore, they're still logging and banking your information, right? They can still show up to a game and not tell you. They can still answer the phone. Let's say you call them. Let's say you call their office, or you somehow get their cell phone number, which I don't necessarily advocate for, but their office number you could probably find. If they answer the phone, you can talk to them, right? There's no restriction on that either. So there are ways if you're a freshman or sophomore to be able to speak to a coach. If you're a junior or senior, again, I think you're pushing for communication to speak to them as much as possible to get on their radars. But again, I think just want to highlight, if you're on campus, if you show up on campus, or if you're at a camp, you can speak freely with a coach. I do want to reiterate though, if you're doing a visit on campus, I don't think, and I mean, maybe I'm mostly speaking for myself, but I would imagine well, I have spoken to coaches about this. I don't think typically we would prefer you just to show up unannounced at our office because typically during the day we have things we're doing, right? So if we're in our office with our staff or without our staff, we're doing things in that day or we have our day planned. So if somebody just shows up sort of and expects, a 30-minute conversation, an hour conversation, That takes a lot out of our whatever our daily plan was, right? Just as you can imagine, if you're in your job or your business and somebody just comes in, sort of unexpectedly for an hour in the day, and any day, not even saying the most important day of your life, but just a day, right? Just an hour when you're not planning on it and you had other things planned sometimes, um, can kind of throw a wrench into stuff. So I would just say if you're going to visit campus, you want to email and call and try to set an appointment with that coach. Otherwise, I wouldn't necessarily just be expectant and hoping to meet that coach. Now, are there exceptions where the coach is going to be available and friendly and ready to do it? Of course, to meet you, but try to make an appointment if you can. And then one piece I kind of went by actually, as I go back here, is players can also have their coach contact the coach as well. So, for example, I'm an MLS Academy director as well as a college coach. So I can, as a MLS Academy director, speak to another college coach on behalf of my player, whether he's old enough, whether he's a junior, senior, or he's younger, right? So if you have a coach that can advocate for you, I'd highly recommend that as well to speak to coaches. So again, I think sometimes parents just think sophomores and down can't speak to college coaches, but I don't think that's true. I mean, there are certain legal ways in which this can happen in the eyes of the NCAA, and I'd encourage you to explore those options. And then, for that kid who like, what about that sophomore kid that I heard that got committed? Obviously it's an outlier. It's a verbal commitment. If you're going to do a verbal commitment, it's a really important that you stick to that verbal commitment. I can't emphasize that enough. But I don't think you have to rush that verbal commitment. I think as much as it'd be kind of nice maybe to be recruited and done as a sophomore, I also think there's a lot of danger there, right? You change a lot as a 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kid. So I think it's just one of those scenarios where maybe that's not even the goal, to be honest, to be that sophomore committed, as much as it maybe sounds nice and to have a whole bunch of options, which is true, but picking the right place really does take time. And, just understand anyway, that was just a verbal commitment because nobody signs anything until their senior year anyway. So let's kind of get an idea of like, what are we planning for? What are we trying to do? What's going to sort of help us stand out? Ideally, you're hoping for 4 touch points each year. So 4 touch points in your freshman year of high school, sophomore year of high school, senior, junior year of high school, and senior year of high school, right? So at least 4 times, at least these 4 touch points, hopefully several times a year. But one, you want the coach of your interest to see a highlight video of you, right? So make a really good highlight video. We'll talk details later. But how can, excuse me, how can a coach see a highlight video of you, right? That's one touch point every year. Another touch point every year is you want a coach to see you in your environment, right? So that means your club team, your high school team, your whatever team playing, live for a coach to see you in your environment. Another touch point is you want to be at one of their camps, right? So where they can work with you, they can talk to you, they can see you in a different way, in different positions potentially, right? You want them to work with you, and then you can evaluate their coaching style. And then you want a personal, credible coach, club or high school, to have a conversation, about you, right? Every year, kind of how you're doing, right? So, can your club coach or maybe high school coach, have a conversation with that coach at the college to say, hey, look, this is how so and so is doing, and he's improving or whatever the scenario is, right? So you want these 4 touch points every year, right? At least one of every, right? Can you give a coach a few highlight videos during the course of the year? I hope so, right? Can a coach see you more than one time live in your environment? I hope so, right? Can a coach see you at a camp more than once? Hopefully, right? Every year. Can you have a person of that can talk for you? Can that person speak for you as well, right? So there's a lot of hopeful solutions, I suppose, of touch points that you want. Well, what if you never hear anything back, right? Well, just keep trying, just understanding that some coaches, to be honest, they're just not good at writing back and getting back to players. Sometimes you're writing the wrong person, right? So this is something that you have to understand is you have to email not just the head coach, email the assistants, whoever's listed on the website, head coach and assistant coaches. You have to make sure that you put all of them in that email. The reason for that is because a lot of times just the head coach doesn't do the recruiting. It's assistant coaches that do the recruiting. So you may be sending emails to a head coach who doesn't check his emails for recruitment when the assistant coach might just be sitting there in the office waiting for emails to come in and never gets them. So, I mean, it doesn't quite work that way. Usually the head coach might just forward these emails on. But the reality is, if you can email every coach on staff at that institution, you have a better chance. Because sometimes people are just emailing the head coach, and then that email just never gets seen, right? Because the head coach doesn't check the emails for recruitment purposes, believe it or not. So, although the head coach might be the final decision maker, typically the assistant coaches are the ones seeing the most. Um, we'll talk a little bit more specifics about who you should be emailing in terms of schools and whatnot. But one important thing is you must only email one program in an email. You can email multiple coaches in the sense of every coach on my staff, every coach on whatever school's staff you can email, but you cannot email two institutions or 10 institutions in one email. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but just keep trying and email every person on staff. All right, we've kind of gotten general. Let's go a little bit more specific. Let's decide which schools are best for you and you hunt those schools. So general rule of thumb is about one school per month until graduation. So if you're a senior right now, right? Um, so for here it's 12, but that's really if it's a senior in the summer. So now if you're a senior, you have 6 months till graduation. So if you have 6 months till graduation, more or less your list should be about five or six schools if you haven't committed already, right? So that's just a rule of thumb, because you can't be hunting a million schools. So that means if you're a junior right now, you have 18 months till graduation, so your list should be 15 to 20 schools that you're hunting, right? If you are a junior, sophomore, if you're a sophomore, right, then you expand that list to about 30 schools. And so what you're doing, and I'll talk about how to make that list, is you're just emailing and calling and trying to connect with that set of 30 or 18 or five or six schools. You don't want to have a bigger list than that because it's too hard to manage. You don't want to have a smaller list than that either because it's not enough. And from there, if you're consistently trying to connect to those schools, it'll help you a lot, right? So how do you make that list? How do you make an effective list? Because, everybody can just put sort of those top schools that we've always heard of. You just say like, if you're on the West Coast, UCLA, Stanford. If you're on the East Coast, you're talking about Clemson, Wake Forest, Duke. If you're, in the Midwest, you're talking about Indiana, Notre Dame, and things like that. Anybody can put that list together, that's not really a list. That's just kind of putting out names that everybody's heard of. You may not be able to play at those schools, but are there some great institutions that you can play at? Absolutely, right? 100%. So I think it's important to make your own list and then hunt those schools. And then if Clemson, Indiana, Notre Dame, UCLA, whoever, if they come after you, great, right? Then you can still talk to them. But you need to have a list that's a little bit more specific for you, right? So one, academics, the level of academics plus potential major. That's one part that I'd probably start with. So if you have a 4.0, there's some schools that you really shouldn't look at, even if they recruit you because it's not a good fit for you academically. If you're 2.0, there's really some schools you shouldn't necessarily apply to. So that means if you're gonna go, excuse me, if you're gonna go to, if you're a 2.0 student and you're trying to play at Stanford, that's probably gonna be unlikely. I mean, there's a lot of schools 2.0 will not let you in, right? If you're a 3.0, are you shooting for an Ivy League school? Maybe not, because maybe even if the coach can get you in, are you going to drown there? Is it going to be too hard, right? So you got to find the right fit. The other thing is like, what if you want to be an engineer and that school doesn't offer engineering, or any sort of version of that? I mean, for the most part, your degree, I think, unless you're going to become a doctor, you're not going to become an art history major if you want to be a doctor. But for the most part, your degree doesn't have to be that specific unless there is a specific, um, job that you want to get with that degree. If you want to be a lawyer, you got to have something that kind of helps you to go towards law school. But the reality is, it's important to find the right fit for you academically. Then the next piece is the location. Do you want to stay on the West Coast? Do you want to go to the East Coast or stay on the East Coast or Midwest and whatever it is, right? So if you can imagine, let's say I use those first two criteria. If I say academics and location, so if I'm going to say I want a really good academic school on the West Coast, I mean, you're only like at 10 schools now. You've literally taken every school off and you have 10 schools basically. So if you're saying really academic West Coast schools, right? You're talking about, UCLA, Cal Berkeley, talking about maybe the UC schools, depends on maybe all of them, or depends on how academic you're talking about. You have schools like Oxy, Claremont, Pomona, Caltech, schools like that. Again, there's not that many more, really depending on how you kind of want to use the word highly academic. So if you just said highly academic West Coast schools, you're just down to 10 already, right? And so you can narrow your list that quickly. Now, if academically, you're more open than that, geographically, you're more open than that, and you won't narrow it down that quickly, right? But just having a list can kind of help you narrow down certain schools. Then size of school is important, small, medium, big. So you could go to an Occidental to visit if you live in Los Angeles and say, okay, that's a small school, walk around, 2,000 students. You could go to Loyola Marymount or like a Chapman and has 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 students and kind of feel what that looks like. You could go to a UCLA that has 40,000, walking around, big campus, things like that. And then you can get an idea. Oh, I like a big school. Oh, I like a medium-sized school. Actually, I like a small school, even if you don't want to go to any of those three schools. And then you can at least get an idea. And then if you can now say, okay, academics, West Coast, location, or excuse me, location, West Coast, academics, highly academic, size of school, small, right? Now you're talking about 4 or 5 schools, right? And it's like, boom, your list is already small. And again, if it's kind of like, well, academic, I could be anywhere. Location, I don't care where I want to be. And size of school, I don't care. Well, then it's harder to make your list. It's important that you think about things that are important to you to be successful and enjoy. The next thing is finances, right? Private schools, not private schools, financial aid, loans, all of those things are a real thing. So you're gonna have to do some research. There's something called myscholarly.com, which is kind of cool. It's kind of nice to sort of aggregate some scholarships that are available for the most part to anybody. So just look through that My app or website, and there might be some money that you can find. But for the most part, you have to have these conversations with the coaches once you get down the line, not first, but just speaking to a coach about how do how do players, for the most part, depends on Division 3, Division 2, Division 1, but how are most players of families affording these schools, right? Those questions can be asked. You can ask that coach in a reasonable way without it feeling like you're asking them for a scholarship if it's Division 1 or Division 2. It's just asking them, how do most families afford the education at this school? What are the ways in which families are able to get money towards their education? No coach is going to be upset about that question. They'll just lead you to how players get more money from their schools. Um, if they're going to talk about scholarships, the coach will bring up scholarship if it's Division 1 or Division 2. You also need, next one is your level. So you need to ask for honest feedback. That's part of what our camp is here. So on this weekend, ask them, right? Ask these coaches, what level do you think I can play? Can I play at your level, right? That's an important question that you need to ask. That shouldn't be answered by your mom or dad. That shouldn't be answered necessarily by your club coach if your club coach doesn't have that information or ability to have gotten players into the next level. So as much as everybody's going to tell you, look, you can play Division 1, you're amazing, and you are amazing, but maybe you can also be looking at other levels too, right? So as you kind of look at that and then you say, okay, well, you know what? I also want to have an internship, or I want to be part of a club, or I want to have a part-time job, right? Then you would say, okay, maybe I wouldn't look at a Division 1 school. So you can imagine somebody who's highly academic, who wants to stay on the West Coast, who maybe likes a medium to small school. Finances are maybe the family has extra means, or they don't have a lot of means, depends on where they look there, right? If they have an idea of where they can play, any level, 1, 2, or 3 division, and then they want to have an internship or something, again, like just having those ideas cuts down your school list pretty quickly. Because I think if you go through this process and you don't have a list, and I think if you don't really know what you want and you're open to anything and open to everything, in some ways that actually makes it harder because then you don't really know where you should be going towards. So you kind of need to have a target, right? Just like if you put a GPS in your car, if you don't have a target of where you're going, right, it's going to be that much harder. You don't know where you're going, and you're just hoping that you get to somewhere. But you want to have targets, right? You want to have targets that are reasonable targets. And again, if you have a certain amount of number list based on graduation date and how far you are, I think it's helpful. So then soccer and the roster, right? So soccer and roster are last. A coach could leave, they could bring in 10 internationals. They could change how they play from year to year. I mean, there's a lot of changing parts on the soccer stuff. So I think those things in yellow should be your first things. And then soccer program, roster positions, all that stuff comes after. So make a list of that many schools. And then once you make a list, then you start emailing and calling those coaches as much as possible. That's what you do to help yourself get the best opportunity to play at the next level, right? Because the more you connect and try to connect with the same amount of schools, the more often, the more likely they are to see you until they tell you no or yes, right? So then you connect with them, hopefully, right? And you attend their camps. When you attend their camps, don't be anonymous. You play in from the tournaments, don't be anonymous. So at a camp, when I say don't be anonymous, I mean speak to them, talk to them, say, hey, coach, I'm playing right here on this field. Continue to connect with them. I cannot emphasize more. Go to this camp, talk to coaches, introduce yourself, be that kid. Hey, coach, my name is this. I'm number this. I'm playing on this field. It's okay. That's a good thing. And what I mean by don't be anonymous when you're playing in your tournaments in your environment, speak, open your mouth, be a good leader, work hard, transition well. Do those things. So even if you score a goal or don't score a goal, even if you make a great defensive play or not, you're still not anonymous on the field. So then they watch you play, you do camps if you can, if you can't, it's okay. And then you have your coaching advocating for you, right? And I'm talking about of this schools on your list. So if you're a junior, 18, 15 to 20 schools. Senior, 5 to 6 schools. Sophomore, 30 schools, somewhere around there. Freshman, you have a lot bigger list that you can put together. What does your communication look like, right? So when putting an email, having one online profile is critical. You can do it for free. You don't have to pay somebody to do it. The email should come from a player, not from an agency, not from the parent. Most agency emails are deleted, and sometimes you can tell if a parent has written an email. But the email's got to come just from the player. One program, it can be multiple coaches in the same program, but one program, and it's got to be a scenario in which you are emailing the correct coaches with the correct last name. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then you have links to all of your places that they can just click on. I'll be honest, and here's a question that we have here is, it's basically it's the question's asking, should you make Google folders and Google files for the coaches to find it? I wouldn't say that. I think you need links. You need links to online places, right? Because I think when you start doing like Google folders, Google Drives, things like that, I think it becomes harder. If anything, it becomes harder for a coach where they have to ask permission or they have to go somewhere else. Like, you have to email and you have to wait to get permission. They'll just move on because when a coach gets to doing the recruiting and he's sitting in the office or wherever he's sitting, and he's looking at players, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, wait for permission, and then you got to wait a couple hours till you get an email, and then you open up a permission. It's like we've already moved on to whatever we're doing next, and we don't need kids, right? Like in the sense of there's 450,000 kids, we only need eight, right? So it's not like we're struggling to get kids interested in our programs. So you want to make it as easy as possible for us. So instead of, I mean, you could do it on a Google Doc if you really want, but it has to be open to where when I click it, I don't have to ask for permission or be logged in, that I'm already in. But you want just links, right? Here's my highlight video, here's my online profile, here's my whatever information. But that's a good question, just don't make it complicated for a coach, right? And have everything in one place. That's a really important piece. How often should you communicate, right? You should communicate when there's a significant update. Don't just write to write, but you got to have, you've won something, you've won an award, a tournament, you've been selected to participate in something, you're going to a showcase, you're going to a camp, you're going to play near them, their campus, that is. But I don't think there's a magic formula. I think like, I don't think the magic formula of once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, or whatever matters. I don't think it's a cadence that matters. I think it's when you have a significant update. So it's up to you to work on having a significant update, right? Is you have to be doing things that are worthy of a update, right? And so it's a little bit harder. Like, so ECNL does some sort of awards, so maybe you win one of those awards. If you're playing high school soccer, they do awards. MLS doesn't really do awards. EA does sort of end of the year awards. So it depends on that. But like another significant update, a new highlight video, a new updated highlight video, that's also a reason, right? So you're always trying to find and create reasons that should be a significant update. Another one is so just kind of sending the email. It's a template email here, right? So, dear coach last name. And again, you can just put the head coach's last name, or you can put the staff, dear coach, in my case, LaFerry and staff, or dear coach LaFerry. And then you could put all of my assistants, right? Coach Wright, Coach Meeker, Coach Chavarria, Coach Fabian. You could put those on there as long as it's just to one place, one program. Make sure it's the correct email for the correct program. Don't email me, Occidental, with a coach's last name from another program, right? Because that means you just, you use the template email and you didn't quite catch that change, right? So make sure you double check. But easy email here. Dear coach, whatever, my name is your name. And in research your program, I want to congratulate you for whatever, right? For having a great season in 2023, going to the Sweet 16 and this, that, or whatever, right? Whatever it is, last year winning your conference and whatever. So something that just like, okay, he went 30 seconds online to find it, right? It's helpful, right? It's what you want. So that first sentence. Then I want to connect with you because I'm athletic and I'm technical, and I think that would benefit your program because, whatever your skills and work ethic are, I mean, whatever your things are that you are good at, right? Because why are you going to help my program? I'm number whatever, and I play for whatever team, for coach whoever, and coach whoever would be happy to give you a recommendation. His email and cell are this. Okay, great. 2 or 3 sentences. I know what club team you are. I wonder if I know that coach or not. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I have their email or cell if I want to. And okay, great. I know you, I know what your attributes are. Then your name, right? Your GPA, whatever, right? Again, just another reminder of what you are and what you do well. If you have any accolades, list them. Then here's my video link. Bang, there's your video link that they can click. Our team's going to be playing in the whatever showcase thing here. Are you planning on going? Can you watch in person? Do you have any upcoming camps to consider? Thanks. My name, all the stuff, link to online profile now where they can find everything else. And that's it. That's what an email can look like. You can use that, mostly just add your details, right? And then I think it's important just to have your information, available to a coach, right? So that can be like a simple template email that you can send and just make sure you specify it for you. Again, don't put more than one program on an email. So don't send this email to 25 coaches. It's not going to work. You got to delete that. It's going to get deleted. And then you have to make sure that you're putting it into just some individual thought to add some personal touch to each email. Then hopefully there's some connection, right? If they never connect with you, you probably got to add some schools to your list or take some schools off. If they say, hey, we're not interested, great, take them off. Um, that's a good question in the chat. Is the subject line important, So not really. I mean, yes and no. Like 6'3" center back, MLS Next 4.0. That will probably get opened by every college coach in the country. Um, what if you're not 6'3"? Then center back, MLS center back 4.0. What if you're not 4.0? Center back, it depends on what your GPA is, depends on what your height is. Maybe just center back, it again depends, right? If you don't have any of those things that are helpful, it's harder, right? So if you're an undersized center back playing at a low level, I don't really think it matters what your subject line is. You're just gonna have to get these guys to see you play live because you have special attributes, right? So then if you're an undersized center back playing at a low level, but you think you can play college soccer, then you have to put in what your best strengths are. So it's leadership driven, hardworking center back, 2026, something, right? Whatever your best attributes are. But that's it. Just something basic. Your grad year should definitely be in there. Your position should definitely be in there. And then if there's one or two more things, that's a good question on subject line. So, next one, right? So now you get on campuses, watch their fall and spring trainings if you can, learn about their programs, right, as much as you can, get connected to the college coaches, clean up your social media accounts. This is not a social media story, but it's a true story. It's an email story. But a guy emailed me, Thug Nasty David was his email address. I don't know where Thug Nasty David is. I hope he's safe and I hope he's changed his ways, but he didn't play for me. So I don't know, maybe he was the best soccer player that ever lived, and I would never know, right? So, make sure your email handle is clean, make sure your social media accounts are clean, because some programs actually employ people to look at social media accounts of the incoming people in their athletic department. So make sure you clean that up. Videos, your video needs to be spot on. So there's a kind of a question here is like, do you pay for people to do these things for you, right? Write emails and videos and stuff like that. You can. I don't think you have to. I think you can do the work. Like I said before, an email really should come from you. Um, and then like a person who helps you isn't necessarily going to be able to talk to a coach any different than you would. Um, you know, I guess what I would say when it comes to hiring somebody to help you is you can. I don't think it's going to hurt you. It's not necessarily always what you must do, but it's also not necessarily something that's going to be harmful for you. I just feel like a college coach wants to hear from you, the player, not necessarily somebody else. The highest level programs, they're already getting kids from wherever they want to get kids from. So they're not necessarily waiting to hear from a recruiting agency or a recruiter. I think what a recruiting agency can help you with is if you're open to going anywhere, right? If you're open to going anywhere in the country to play, potentially, I think they can find places for you in that respect. I think they can also help you with good videos. So if you don't know somebody or you're not able to go on iMovie or have some other software to create a really good video, I think paying for a really good video is helpful. Um, 'Cause I think your first video should be 2 minutes, 3 minutes maybe. And it's just your top stuff. Whatever the best things that you've ever done on film, right? So for the first 5 minutes, not 5 minutes, first 2 minutes, it's just got to be your best three or four things, right? So the best thing you've done in the last 6 months, and I say 6 months because boys physically change, right? So if you're a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, in a video when you're 18 now, you're going to look like a little kid, right? So you don't want us as a college coach to say, okay, this guy's really small, when you're 6 inches bigger now, right? So I think 6 months is sort of a good barrier where you're updating the very best thing you have. You have to have like arrows, halo, something in your clips that says, here's where I am in every clip, because we're not going to be like, you're the guy in yellow shoes and the white jersey on the far side in the video. It's like we're not going to do that, We're just going to stop watching the video. Again, you want to make it easier for us. So make sure you have that, a halo, something, whatever, arrows, and then roll the video back a few seconds, and then roll it forward a few seconds before the play, right? So for example, if you're forward and you're scoring a goal, don't just do the clip where it's like you just heading the ball, It's like back it up 5 seconds so we can see you run into the box, hopefully a couple seconds so we can see the ball hit the back of the net. Or if it missed, you probably got to decide if you want that in there. But ultimately, it should be your best stuff. And then if you do something 3 months later that's really good, just replace your worst clip with, that next better one, and just sort of keep ranking your clips, 1 through 5. The very best one should be 1. The second best one should be 2. And then 5 clips, and that's 3 minutes, 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes. Um, it's a good question as I'm looking through the chat. Will a longer video hurt you? No, I don't think a longer video hurts you, but I think just coaches are only going to watch the 3 minute video. Not only that, they're only going to watch the first clip. And if they don't like the first clip, they're not going to watch the second clip, right? So your first clip has to be your best clip. It can't just be something that anybody can do. It's got to be a first clip where we're like, oh, this guy's got something, we want to watch a second clip. And then if a coach wants to watch more from you, then he'll watch more from you, right? And he'll ask you, oh, that was a great highlight video. Do you have more film, right? And then you can either show them an every touch video, you can show them a whole entire, you can send a whole entire game, you can do whatever you want, right? After that. But it's kind of like a movie trailer, you just want your your best 2 minutes of stuff, and then hopefully they want, a little bit more, right? But that's where you want to take time and money on a really good highlight video. So again, if you're super creative, and you can do it easily by yourself, you should do it by yourself. But if you need help from somebody, and you don't have somebody that's a good friend of yours, maybe you could trade, right? So if you have a friend who's really good at that stuff, maybe your friend can do it, and then you just help them in a different way, right? Give them a free soccer lesson. I don't know, whatever you can do to help them to make that video for you. But otherwise, pay somebody to do that. Something that's been interesting is music versus voice. So, firstly, a music song will never help you get recruited, but it could hurt you if you use potentially music that has like expletives or kind of talks, in a bad way. There are some schools and some coaches who just won't appreciate that, right? And they won't want to recruit you. Most coaches might just mute the volume altogether, but the reality is the music choice is not going to help you. It's just going to hurt you. So you can pick something that's either reasonably safe or reasonably common. Don't worry about that. But something that I've really heard that I really like recently, or in the last couple of years, I've seen is where their club coaches, if they're highly reputable club coaches, they're doing a voiceover over the video, right? So imagine if a video is playing right now, and then as the video is playing, showing you clips, it would be like the coach, right? So I would be like, okay, so and so is an excellent player because of this. He works hard in training, blah blah blah. So I'm like talking as the club coach or high school coach while I'm watching the video, while you're watching the video of the players, right? So that would be helpful. So if you can have a coach that's reputable to do that for you, that's something you'd also want to consider. All right. So what happens if you get a Zoom or you meet in person? Be prepared, sound professional, dress up. If your parents are in the conversation, if your parents cannot lead the conversation, it has to come from you as a player. So that's not typical necessarily where the parents will be in the meeting, whether it's a Zoom or in person, but it happens sometimes. And so if it does, your player has to lead it. Has to, has to, has to. And I say that because we're going to have a lot of questions if the parents are the ones asking questions. If the players kind of back like this and then the parents are kind of like forward, we're going to say, oh, I don't know if I want this kid, because if the parents are doing it all. So if you're a parent, just game plan with your son. Have him have a notebook. We're not gonna penalize a kid. Actually, I think it's beneficial if a kid has a notebook with him with questions, right? If he has that, whether it's on a Zoom, phone call, whatever. And as a parent, you can game plan with your kid, right? So the night before, ask the questions and have your son write those questions down in his notebook, right? So then your son could read that question and it looks like it's coming from him, your son, but it's really your question, right? So you can do that as a parent, so as a prospective player is, what questions the night before to your parents, what questions you want and you can write them down. And then as a player, you don't have to fight their questions. You can write them all. And then you don't have to ask them, right? So if some of those questions as a player you think aren't questions that you feel comfortable asking, you don't have to ask the question, right? But your parents, you would have had that already in your notebook, right? And your parents would have kind of had that question for you in case you don't have any more questions or or you feel like it's important in the moment. So, it's a way where you guys can have the questions and it comes from the player, and I think that would be very helpful and beneficial. Some easy questions to ask. What's a typical day look like? How do you balance academics, soccer, travel? What roles do first years play? Where do you see me fitting in? I put this in yellow because that's a good question where you'll get information back, right? So a coach can't answer that question if they don't know about you, right? So that's kind of like a BS-ometer, sort of, right? Where it's like if a coach he's like, yeah, I think you'd be great for us. You're so fast flying up and down the wings. But if you're like, I'm a slow center forward, plays back to goal, right? Then the coach doesn't know anything about you. Or the other side, if he gives you a vision of how you fit in, it's really helpful, right? How he can help you. So that's a decent question to ask. And then there's just some others, right? Describe your coach's style, formation, things that you'd like to style of play, stuff like that. This is the last year of sort of COVID affected the class. So COVID might not be any more the question. It might more be internationals, transfer portals, things like that. Don't ask, how much scholarship money can you offer me? You can talk about the financial component, but not scholarship money specifically. The coach will bring that up. And there's just a lot of other questions. The one I put in yellow here is, again, you're not going to want to say, I want to go to this school for engineering when they don't have anything to do with engineering. So it's like you have to know that as well, right? As I look in the chat, here's a question, can players play Division I soccer and be engineering majors? Yeah. Can they excel in that? Yeah, it's hard, I mean, like Columbia, you can do engineering at Columbia, and that's Division I institution, and they'll figure that out, right? Is it difficult? For sure. Um, but if you want to be an engineer, you can still be certainly, a soccer player in college, maybe it's a Division 3 institution, maybe it's Division 2 institution. It could still be a Division 1 institution as well, but that will be difficult. It will be a challenge. It's a good question, but yeah, it's very possible. It's just challenging. And I don't think challenging is a bad thing. So let me look at some of these questions that you guys have kind of asked as well, and then I'll kind of recap there. So um, with D3 being, okay, so basically it says, that's a good question. It's a long question. So it's basically saying since there's no money in Division 3 athletically, are those off the table basically, right? If you can't afford a private school. No, and so you have to ask, right? Every institution, every coach that responds to you, how do families afford afford the tuition at the school, and room and board, and what are the ways in which families are able to afford this, right? That's an okay question to ask coaches, right? Like, how are families primarily making this work, right? And the coach will tell you. I mean, there's Division 3 schools that can give merit scholarships, that can give uh, that are based on need, that are based on anything, leadership. Maybe you're a Boy Scout, maybe like a blue and gold scholarship because they like you from California. I mean, Division 3 schools especially can do that kind of stuff, but it's an institution thing. It's not across the board. But it's just my way of saying and answering that question is a good one. Um, don't give up on a Division 3 or even Division 2 institution or even Division 1 institution just because you're not getting athletic scholarships. There's money to be given at a lot of schools. You just have to ask the right questions. So I think those are really important. Um, Another good one. Do you have to play MLS or ECNL to get recruited? No. Is it generally regarded as the highest level MLS and ECNL? Generally speaking, yes. MLS, I think certainly is generally regarded as the highest level, and then ECNL would be after that. But it doesn't mean after EA, or excuse me, EA, NPL, EA, E64. Of course, there are college players that play those levels, definitely, right? So those are questions that you can ask this weekend to coaches, right? So how many players from your roster do you have from MLS Next or EA or ECNL or International? You'll get different answers to those questions. And I think every college coach is going to tell you they have players from all of those levels for the most part. Um, it's about finding the best player, not necessarily just taking players from the same level. So I think that's important to ask those coaches. But yeah, absolutely. If you play NPL or EA or E64, ECRL, that doesn't mean you can't play in college at all. You just have to be the right fit for that school. Application deadlines, yeah, they matter. In most cases, if a school, the question here is, for seniors, do application um, deadlines matter, right? Yeah, certainly. Some schools are more open to them than others. So a school like Occidental, they're pretty tight on that deadline. Our deadline's January 10th, for example. Do I have a few days leeway? Yes. Do I have a few months leeway? No. Are there other schools in our conference that are basically rolling admissions all the way through the summer? Yes, right. So are there some Division 1 schools that are closer or not? Yeah, for sure. So application deadlines do matter, but you got to ask the coach, I guess, before you kind of just make that determination. Um, would you do anything differently? Your next question, as a goalkeeper versus a field player? No, actually, I think it's easier to do a goalkeeper video, if that's what you're talking about. Because I think as a video, it's just your best 3 or 4 saves, you dealing with crosses, and then 3 to 4 distribution scenarios and movements. And that's probably enough for a video. That's, granted, that's like 12 clips, but they can go pretty quickly. So that's what I would do if I was a goalkeeper on a video. Um, so that's actually pretty easy. I think if you're like a forward, it has to be goals. Like it shouldn't just be other things. If you don't have 12 goals on video, then you haven't scored a lot of goals as a forward, over the last 6 months. If you're a midfielder at 10, it should be goals or leading to goals. If it's an 8, sort of box to box stuff. If you're a defensive midfielder, breaking up plays and connecting passes, right? If you're an outside back, sort of bombing up and down the line, hitting across. If you're a center back, either scoring set pieces or defending well in 1v1 actions. right? So I think it just depends on what position you play, but I think goalkeeping highlight video, might actually be a little bit easier as long as it's all game stuff. Don't show training videos. Training videos are sort of a waste, I think. Just do the actual stuff. Oh, sorry, last question. Well, internationals. Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of internationals in college soccer. So it's kind of either okay. So how do you, as an international, get seen is the question here. Um, you get seen by videos and then picking the one or two camps that you can go to that are highest impact. But really, it's a lot of videos. So if you're international, you got to have tons of video, tons of highlights. Keep sending those coaches your highlights videos. Maybe an agency can help you, but ultimately, it's going to be a lot of videos. And then most coaches are going to want to see you play live. So ultimately, you're going to have to find a way to get over to the US if you're an international. So let's just for now, let's go back to it. Recap, right? What are the ways to give yourself the best chance? Know the odds, increase them in your favor. Learn about Division 3, 2, 1, NAIA. See what the differences are in increasing your options. Know that the roster cap thing could be happening in Division 1. So if that's the case, you're gonna have less spots at Division 1 than there are now, right? An average roster size in Division 1 is about 30 or 31. So now they're asking him to go to 28, So it's not like that roster number is going up, the roster number is going down in Division One. Learn about your options in the financial aid side, right? And, just know that there might be some more options that you didn't think were possible before. Create your list and hunt those schools. You have to. Invest time or money or both in an excellent video, right, of your highlights, game highlights only, not training videos. Prepare good emails, right, that are personal, one by one in terms of programs. Have a sharp email, online presence, right, all that stuff. Oh, there's another question. So, yeah, that's a fair question. So the question is, should you keep, basically the question is, should you stay on the same email thread? So like that means if a coach responds to you, in whatever way the coach responds to you, you should respond back. If the coach text messages you, text him back. If the coach calls you, call him back. If the coach DMs you, DM him back. If the coach continues to respond on the same email thread, continue to send that email on the same email thread. Again, you just want to make it as easy as possible for coaches to recruit you. To go back to it, yeah, go to their tournament, go to the camps, play in camps tournaments, become a stronger student, of course, for Merit Aid as well. Play on the top teams where you can play. So, does it help to play on the top level teams in general? Yes. But if you're at the top level, but you're not playing, that doesn't help, right? So, make sure you're playing, make sure you're at a place that you're actually playing, right? It doesn't help to be on the best team and not playing at this point in your career where you're 16, 17, 18 years old and you need to be seen. But it also doesn't help to be on a team of a really low level where you're playing all the time, but you're not getting chances to play in big showcases or against really good players consistently. Leverage your coach to talk to other coaches on your behalf. And remember those touch points, right? Remember those touch points each year, getting, to camps, your environment, coaches, and your highlight videos. And we're wrapping up here, it's kind of those last questions. I've tried to answer some of them as well as we're going through it. Some frequent mistakes that families make in the process is, thinking it's Division One or bust. It's like there's so many more options, right? That we spoke about is knowing that there's a lot of other places that your son can play, and it's better that he plays at these other places than not plays at all, in my opinion. It depends on where he wants to go, or as opposed to like just hanging up, like hanging up the boots after his 18th birthday, especially when you put in so much time and money into it. When there are places he can play that maybe it's not those top four-letter schools that you've heard of, that everybody kind of knows where, maybe there's other options, right, that you can play at. Um, so feeling overwhelmed with analysis paralysis, these are sort of the same kind of two and three, like not making a list and just feeling like I don't know what to do. It's actually fairly clear what you got to do. You have to hunt the schools, you have to email them, you have to make lists, you have to connect with coaches as much as you can, you have to get in front of them, their eyes. And when you are, you have to let your feet do the talking and you have to do the business on the field when they see you, that's what you have to do. Um, and then not filling out the NCAA clearinghouse. So if you want to play Division One or Division Two, you have to have the NCAA clearinghouse. So Just Google NCAA Clearinghouse. You go to the Eligibility Center at the NCAA website, ncaa.org, and just set up an account. It's like $96. Your guidance counselor at school has to fill it. Basically, it's to see if you're eligible to play in the NCAA Division One or Division Two. So all your grades are sort of put in there. So a college coach can go to your online profile, your clearinghouse number, and see if you're eligible to play college soccer, right? So it's helpful and they need to do it. So you should do the online profile, the NCAA clearinghouse, anyway, um, just to have it, right? So so the question on the clearinghouse, yeah, well, wait, you could just Google NCAA clearinghouse, or again, you go to ncaa.org and then go to eligibility center. But there's not necessarily a deadline to do it, is the kind of the question, but you want to do it as soon as possible. It's not like after a certain date you can't do it, but if you're a senior in high school and you haven't done it yet, you got to do it sooner than later if you want to play Division One or Division Two. Some other questions about camps. Yeah, not all camps are good, you know. I mean, I think if they're just kind of watching kids play without instruction, without interaction, without other stuff, then um, maybe they're not necessarily good, you know. But they have numbered bibs, if coaches know who they are, they have their rosters, they're coaching them. Yeah, I think they're generally good, you know. Every coach can see players, right? In different ways. I think, for us, we try to add as much value as possible. So I just want to add all the value that I can for you guys, because I played college soccer. My wife played college water polo. I went through the process as a student athlete. And it is Division One student athlete. You know, I grew up here in Southern California, so I remember the process as well, even though it's changed, over the last 15, 20 years, but it's not that dissimilar, but it's changed slightly, but not all that much. Um, and I want you guys to experience, what I've experienced, what I've seen firsthand. I've seen college sports being really positive for so many people, and I want to help get you guys to that level, or at least give you the opportunity, and so that's for the most part how we try to do it and add value, to you guys who are coming to camp, right? And so that's part of the Zoom and other things. Another question comes out like, do coaches recruit from them? And it's like, yeah, of course, if we see a player that we like, we're definitely going to and ask that player where we can see them next, right? Whether it's their own personal camp or it's whatever their team is doing, But I mean, we have, like I said, but I've said before, we have over 75 kids on current rosters who have come through our camps, this year. So, a lot of kids come through camps that are on NCAA rosters. So I think it's really important, So yeah, absolutely. If a coach sees a player and they like them, they will tell their head coach if they're the assistant coach. Actually, most of the time, the assistant coaches do the recruiting, not the head coach. So, I'd make a strong argument you want the assistants there as well. Certainly Division One, to a degree, less so in Division Two and Division Three, but even still, uh, assistants have a lot to say about recruitment in in all divisions, really, as you move forward. A little less Division Three because there's not that many full-time assistant coaches in Division Three. So a lot of times in Division Three, the head coach is the only full-time position. Well, I would say a lot, but certainly more than in Division Three and excuse me, than in Division Two and Division One. Division Two and Division One, usually you'll have one or two or three full-time assistant coaches. So usually those are the ones doing the recruitment at Division One, Division Two. So, those are kind of the piece there, So again, I appreciate you putting the questions in the chat. I've kind of been able to answer most of them as they come through. Um, again, so as you're going to the camp, don't be anonymous. Make sure you take the opportunity to speak to the coaches as much as possible, understanding, that this is an opportunity, a unique one, and hope you take advantage of it. So I appreciate it, you guys. Have a great night. I'll get this email or the video. So yes, I will. So in that question, yes, I'll email this out with the slides as well. So okay, all right, you guys. I appreciate it. Have a good night. We'll see you on Saturday. All right, take care. Or Sunday for some of you. All right, take care. Bye.